Friday the 1st of December. This is the Climate Alarm Clock. This week's headlines: COP28 is kicking off in Dubai. What should we be looking out for there? And behind the scenes, oil companies and petrostates are still trying to sell oil. And warnings of food shortages caused by the climate crisis. Hello and welcome to the Climate Alarm Clock, your Irish climate news podcast. I'm Darragh and I'm joined today by Anna Pringle and Ciara Daly for the 6th episode of Season 5 for what I feel like is our COP preview. Anna and Ciara, how are you both doing?
All good, Darragh. I can't believe it's December. Where did this year go?
I know, it's actually shocking. I feel like it's still March.
At least it's cold now, though. Proper
No!
winter.
Yeah, and
sunshine
at
back.
least we've got COP to keep us company for the next couple of weeks.
Keep us warm.
And we have our special guest joining us, which we'll be talking about in just a minute. Before we do, just a huge thank you to everyone who has supported us on Buy Me a Coffee. We've had some lovely comments in, Anna.
Yes, Darragh. Someone who chose to remain anonymous bought us a lot of coffees since our last episode and said, fantastic job merging global and Irish climate news and pulling no punches. I like that. And they said that they love every episode, which is very nice to hear. And then Pat bought us some coffee. This is a comment I know you love, Darragh.
Is it Pat or Paul?
It's Pat. Started listening this week. Great energy from you all together. Love the way you keep throwing Darragh off his thought process.
Yeah,
I don't think we do that, Ciara, do we? Do we throw Darragh off his thought process?
Oh, you throw Darragh
off his thought process.
Yeah.
So we'll try not to do that today, Darragh, okay?
Yeah, so come for the mild bullying, stay for the climate news.
And also thanks to Paul, who didn't leave a comment but bought us some coffees. It's great to get those acknowledgements. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. We do really, really appreciate it. And if you would like to support the work we do, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com/climate alarm clock.
Okay, and Darragh, we've been trying to say this for weeks, but do you know that we have listeners in 49 different countries? We've never got around to mentioning that.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Barbados.
Yeah, and
so we're nearly as many countries as COP.
Yeah, and we're trying to get them to buy us coffees instead of sell them oil. So anyways, for the last few weeks we have been joined by some very special guests for each episode, and the idea is that we're bringing people whose background isn't necessarily climate change to just get people's opinions and have those conversations to try and normalize those climate conversations. So we know that 70% of Irish people are worried about climate change, but loads of people never talk about it. So we're just trying to normalise those chats, one special guest at a time. We've actually kind of changed our protocol. This person, I'd say, is a bit of a climate person. He is a guest we've had on the podcast before. It's Eoin Galavan, who's a clinical psychologist and one of the founding members of the PSI's Environment and Climate Special Interest Group. So we've done a couple of special episodes around psychology with Eoin, and today he's joining us for the news roundup, which I'm really thrilled about, really, really looking forward to just having the chats and getting his perspective. So Eoin, welcome back to the Climate Alarm Clock. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Darragh. Good morning, everyone. Great to see everyone.
Eoin. I should
I'm
add that
so excited to have you here. This is going to be like my own personal therapy session. I hope you're ready. I've missed all the specials you've done.
you missed the specials. But you know, Eoin, just not to kind of butter you up or anything, but your special on climate anxiety, I think, is our most listened to episode. And we'll put a link in the show notes for it because it's fairly timeless. We'll put a link in the show notes for anyone who missed it earlier this year.
Oh, that's really nice to hear. How cool.
Don't tell him that. He'll want some of our coffee.
Just for any listeners, just so they know, I'm not in that episode. So if you're tuning in to listen to me being interrupted, you won't get it from that episode. But it's
purely a coincidence, Darragh, that's our most listened to episode, of course.
Eoin, just before we get into it, for people who maybe haven't listened or come across you before, Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of came to this climate issue? It wasn't always an area of focus for you in your work.
No, it wasn't at all. I'd never intended to point myself as a psychologist towards the issue of climate and environmental emergency. About 2 years ago, I think, just before COP26, I guess that would have been, coming out of COVID, started to pay a little bit more attention. There was something about COVID that somehow made looking at the climate crisis a little bit more. It was like the bubble of safety that we'd all been living in had somehow been broken. And once I realized it could be broken with one thing, I thought, geez, I better have a closer look at this other emergency that people have been talking about, see if it's also serious. And it really is. So it scared the bejesus out of me. I went through this really intense period of a couple of weeks of not being able to sleep properly and, being anxious and kind of slightly frantically going around looking for people to talk to about it, who were also, over the threshold of awareness, if you want. And very, very grateful that I found lots of people who were, and very kind people, lots of psychologists who were. So it was during that period I started to, really think about the fact that there's a psychological, behavioral, social dimension to the fact that this, enormous crisis is occurring in real time around us, and yet many people, most of us in some way, are still operating as if it's not. And I thought, wow, that is quite a phenomenon from a psychological point of view. So that kind of drew me into that part of it, if you want. And we set up the PSI special interest group with some fabulous people in there. And we've been tipping away at various bits and pieces, doing conferences and talks and stuff for the last couple of years since then.
Wow, that's so interesting. I never realized you were so new to it. I would have just assumed you were in the realm of climate for years, but that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, I went through a crash course.
Yeah.
A diet of nothing but climate-related information for about 12 months.
Yeah.
But I think, what I think is really interesting is, I'm sure there are people out there, and they're probably not our listeners, but I'm sure there are people out there who have had that same experience as you, of that, 2 weeks of real intensity and not being able to sleep and getting bogged down by it, but who never found that network, and who just kind of, either are just crippled by it or just forgot about it again. I'm sure there are so many people out there who've had that experience, but maybe haven't taken it on to the extent that you have.
Yeah. I think the thing that got me over the line into kind of sticking with it, that notion of staying with the trouble, was the kind of father in me. Because one of the lenses I was looking at was, where are my kids going to be in 10 years' time? Because, myself and my wife would be talking about schooling and aspirations for, you go through wouldn't it be great if they, went to college, and thinking about their future lives and all that. And at the same time, hearing news that's saying, within, and that it stopped being decades away, now it's within their lifespan, all of these incredibly horrible things might occur, likely to occur. And that really shook me out of kind of inertia. And I said, I can't live with myself if I don't contribute in some kind of way, put my voice to it in whatever way I can. But I think you're right there. I think it's really challenging for people to stay with it, because there's actually a lack of cohesive engagement for people. You have to really be purposeful and really put your mind to it to stay connected to it.
Yeah, it's very easy to go back to your daily life and rhythm and, all of that, and put it to one side and almost forget about it. I mean, I think, unlike you, I think it took me about 10 years to find a tribe of people who got it. But I really relate to your whole point about lying in bed awake going, oh my God, what are we doing? I mean, I think that's a very natural reaction when the enormity of it hits people.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I see a lot of parallels between what you were saying on there, and it makes me think of like, I probably really only started to absorb and go through that similar process of being like, oh my God, what is this awful feeling in my heart, like while I absorbed this information. But it was only because I was part of this podcast. And like, I remember one day, and I've probably told this story on the podcast before, sitting in my office, looking out the window and being like, what the hell is going on with the world? And like ringing Darragh, and I was like, I'm going to shut down my business. I work in marketing. I'm causing this. And like, just like going through this like absolutely whirlwind of emotions for about 2 or 3 weeks, and just being like, what is the point of anything? Like, just being so, not what is the point of anything, but just being so desperate is the only way I can describe the emotion. And the only reason I actually came out on the other side of it, where I was like, no, I'm going to actually stick with this topic, I'm not going to turn away from it, is because I was involved in a bloody podcast. But like, I had the privilege of having people who had already gone through this and really empathized. It wasn't like, oh my God, I'm so sorry that you feel that way, but like that they'd already experienced the emotion of going through that. But not just that, the fact that I'm in a position that I have a roof over my head, that I can worry about those things, that I, you know, if my business did close down, I have a family that will support me. Like, I had all of these kind of things around me that were a privilege for me to actually even be able to worry about it. So I think when I hear people kind of dip into that conversation around, like, we're at the stage where a lot of our friends are having babies now, and I'm like, how can you not think about your children? And then I'm like, of course, why would you? And it's not that they're not, but I'm like, how come you're not in a podcast or whatever? Like, I have these moments where I'm like, why aren't you doing more? And then I'm like, you're not, like, you know, I always have to kind of take a breath and be like, I have a lot of privileges that I was able to actually have that breakdown over it and come out the other side of it again.
Well, you've had the breakdown on air, Ciara, over the last couple of years. You know?
Oh, yeah.
I haven't those realizations, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
the- I think-
realizations. Yeah.
Yeah. We will get into COP now shortly, but I think the one thing for me there, when you were saying that, Ciara, about having those frustrations of like, you know, how are you not doing this? How are you not getting it? How are you not taking action? And like, I've had those thoughts and feelings before, when I myself had only been involved, you know, in the climate stuff for maybe a year or two.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why do I get to decide that now is the time that everyone, you know, now that I've done it, then I'm like, no, now everyone needs to be doing this. Why are you not? Even though someone could have just as easily said the same thing to me 6-7 years ago. All right. So, well, I'm not sure, to be honest, what COP does for our state of mind. I really don't know what to make of it this year, but COP28 is kicking off. It has probably started by the time you are listening to this podcast. So I suppose for anyone who doesn't know what COP is, it is a gathering of most of the countries of the world. There'll be 160 heads of state there arriving today, Friday, if you're listening, or Thursday even, basically to come together to discuss climate action and what needs to be done. So famously at COP21 in Paris, the Paris Agreement was signed where the aim was to keep warming below 2 degrees with an aspirational target of 1.5 degrees. And part of the Paris Agreement was that every few years there will be a global stocktake being done, so that basically all the countries will come together and assess how they were doing, assess their progress, see how they're doing when it comes to the targets. And I think the stocktake was meant to have taken place last year or the year before even, but because of COVID,
I think 2020 was 5 years. I think 5 years after Paris. So was it supposed to be at the end of 2020? I think,
or possibly 2021, because it was
Maybe,
not signed until. But anyways, it's happening now, which is a stocktake to basically see how far things have gone and what should happen next. So part of this stocktake is this thing called the ratchet mechanism. So the idea with the ratchet is, you know, once you tighten a ratchet, then you can't loosen it. You can only make it tighter and tighter. So the idea with the ratchet mechanism of the Paris Agreement is once a country has committed to a target, then they can't weaken that target. They can only strengthen it. So that was kind of always a reason for optimism when targets weren't maybe strong enough, is that, oh, well, you know, now that they've set this as their baseline, they can only get more ambitious and more ambitious. So we'll be hoping to see lots of countries upping their ambitions and upping their targets. There'll also be a big focus on loss and damage this year. And we talked a bit about that last week, but basically a loss and damage fund where developed countries are providing money to the most affected countries most affected by climate change for loss and damage. So there will be a lot of focus on that this year. But obviously the whole thing to a certain extent is I think overshadowed by the fact that it's going on in the UAE, and lots of the stories that we're hearing coming out about it that we'll get into in a minute. But before we get into that, any thoughts on COP from anyone? Anything anyone's looking forward to over the next 2 weeks?
You know, it strikes me, Darragh, I was thinking this as I was reading up about it. It's like a giant climate camp, except with governments and businesses and stuff. I was thinking about the climate camp we were at in Leitrim during the summer. This is like a giant climate camp. It's how many, 100,000 delegates, is that right? Did I get that right? 400,000 visitors. And I kind of look and go, why are they all there? I'm not sure, but so it's a lot of talking, and I think one of the things about it is that it does give a platform to countries that we wouldn't necessarily hear from otherwise. So I'm thinking about friend, the president of Barbados, or the prime minister of Barbados, who was very powerful in the last couple of years, and we wouldn't hear about her otherwise. And then Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, who I think has become a really amazing spokesperson on these issues. So one of the things the UN Development Programme has identified as a major theme is fossil fuels, and yet here they are in the UAE with the biggest reserves of gas in the world, I think. But Antonio Guterres has said that the COP needs to aim for a complete phase out of fossil fuels. And that's interesting as a starting point. I doubt very much that will happen, but it's at least he's putting it out there and saying, making people squirm a bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's for me, it's kind of hard not to be cynical about it going on in the UAE. I think it's also that thing that I was saying earlier of, when I first came to the climate thing, and then I heard about COP, and I was like, oh, this thing is happening. This is going to be amazing. This is going to sort it. And then it didn't. And then the next year I was like, oh, hopefully this year. And now once again, I realized there have been 28 of these COPs.
Yeah.
And things are going the wrong direction. So what good, what good does it do? I agree with you, Anna. I like Mia Motley, the president of Barbados, some of the things that she says, some of the messages that get out there, if you do tune into them, are brilliant. But yeah, it's hard to know. Oh, and I'd love to get your kind of general thoughts on COP as an entity.
It's a real example of doublethink, isn't it? An invitation to pretend we don't know what's really going on because we hope something else is going on. That we hope the endeavour is what it says on the tin, which is an effort to address, reducing fossil fuels. But actually what's happening is all of the, incredibly wealthy, powerful petrostates are gathering to ensure that they do as little as humanly possible to reduce fossil fuel use. There's something really a little bit soul-destroying about all of that, because it's very hard to see another mechanism or kind of, it is this big global kind of event. So you kind of think this has the potential, you can see the potential of something like this with all the powerful countries in the world coming together, all of the, kind of the parties coming together. But then you kind of look at it at the second time and you go, hold on a sec, it's being hosted by the UAE. The president of it is the head of a petrostate and oil company. the stuff that came out recently about their efforts to, use it to kind of broker more oil deals, is just bewildering and disappointing, and could leave you very kind of. So I mean, it's a bit like saying, oh my God, that kind of cigarette company hosted lung cancer conference hasn't led to a reduction in the rates of lung cancer.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing we're putting our effort into.
Yeah.
And being surprised by that. So there's something, I'm not sure. I'm left a bit kind of, I watch it now with a cold eye, and I like the fact that there is that potential there, and it does exist. And as you say, we hear stuff, and it's a real pros and cons good. But Darragh, what you're saying, that every time we've had one of these, emissions have gone up straight after it, despite agreements for targets and policies and all that.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to believe in it when you know that that's true.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, one thing for me that I would see as a positive, I suppose, is the increased coverage that we get because of COP. You see the climate stories, you get all these reports that are brought out in the lead up to COP, and we get that information, and it is in the news more. And I kind of saw that as a positive for a while, but then I kind of think of, is that, do you think, is that totally counterproductive as well? Because what that then happens is it turns it into this news story where we don't hear much about it during the year, and then we hear about COP loads and loads and loads for a couple of weeks, and then we don't hear anything again. So I do wonder if lay people think, they're talking about it, it's bad, all the world leaders have come together, we're not hearing anything about it now, so they must be sorting it out. I do wonder if I do wonder if even the coverage is almost counterproductive, because it sort of could lead to this false sense of security in the public that they think it's under control.
Yeah, I think that's a valid observation, Darragh, that it's almost like it socially validates the status quo inertia. We can talk about it and not do anything about it is now the norm.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, though, I think that might be a step along the road towards talking about it and doing something about it, rather than it being a dead end. So I do think talking about it in the media has to be part of the journey forward, even if we move through a period of talking about it and not acting.
In a very strange way. Maybe this is just me trying to hold on to a bit of optimism. But I think that when this is going to make me sound like a bit of an asshole as well, so please forgive me. But when I first started this podcast, it was around COP and the IPCC and all that, and honestly, the drama of it kind of enticed me into the conversation. I was like, oh, so there's this big conference, but actually everyone is like being a bit false and a bit of telling a few lies, and there's this controversy and there's that controversy. And like speaking honestly, a bit of it was like, wow, this is like a bit more interesting than I thought. And then as I kind of entered into the conversation a little bit more, the emotion started to like really take hold of me. But I like to think that COP28, people are sort of like having those kind of same conversations like you just said there, Darragh. Like, well, why do we need 28 of them? Like, what's happening? And kind of, I don't know, getting a bit drawn in by the drama. I don't know. I feel like the conversations around all of that are happening a little bit more, and people love a scandal.
You're saying they should turn it into a reality TV show?
Yes, I think Big Brother COP28.
Who gets voted out first? Yeah.
I'd say that would actually be a fantastic show in all sincerity.
I think it'd be a lot of boring meetings to watch. So, but yeah, who knows?
So yeah, Owen touched on the sort of real negative side of this, of the UAE planning to use the talks to make oil deals, and Saudi Arabia planning to hook poor countries on oil. Anna, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. But just to finish on COP though, I was actually at a webinar during the week run by DCU Centre for Climate and Society with various various people who know a lot about COP. And one of the things that struck me was, and I think it was Conor O'Neill of Christian Aid Ireland who said it. He said, we shouldn't expect too much from COP. He said, it's not a perfect process. It's not meant to be. And what they were saying was there are all sorts of other processes that are also going on. So don't hang all of your hopes on COP, which I thought was quite wise, actually. And then just coming on to that story, Darragh, one of the reasons we shouldn't hang all our hopes on COP. So Eoin mentioned that it's in the United Arab Emirates, and the president of COP is Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, who is the head of the state oil company there. And there was an investigation done by BBC and the Centre for Climate Reporting, who found out that they found briefing documents that the UAE were using, and that they were discussing fossil fuel deals with at least 15 nations as part of the run-up to COP and to the climate talks. And, the UAE team, according to the BBC, didn't deny using COP28 meetings for business talks, and they said private meetings are private. So
Not wrong.
They're not wrong. So they wouldn't comment on what was discussed, and said we were focused on meaningful climate action. So these talking points that they were using, they were trying to, like, for example, they had one where they were talking to China about working with the UAE on LNG opportunities in Mozambique and so on. And, it's just, and how they would support Colombia in developing its fossil fuel resources. So bad enough that they're the president of COP, but then that they're also using that platform to advance their own business interests is just kind of sickening. Now, Dr. Al Jaber, who gets great coverage in the press, he has said that those allegations were false. And not at all. They didn't do that. And he had a really snotty comment where he said, do you think we need the COP to go and establish better deals or commercial relationships? We don't need that. So you're kind of like, just the arrogance in that statement just jumped off the page.
Is that the tone he used?
I'm imagining that is the tone he used, but probably in more of a UAE accent, not a Donegal accent. But I can just hear him saying that. Why would we need to do that? So that was a scandal that came out in the last week, and just really throws some lots of question marks over the credibility of that presidency. And then talking about petrostates and big bad oil companies. Separate to that, not related to COP, but Saudi Arabia, another investigation has found that Saudi Arabia has this grand plan, as the Guardian says, to hook poor countries on oil. And this is, I mean, talk about an evil plan. And if it sounds familiar, it's because it's right out of the playbook of big tobacco. So what they're trying to do is get poor countries hooked on oil. They are talking about ways that they can drive up the use of fossil fuels in countries like Africa and elsewhere, because they're worried that rich countries are switching more to clean energy, which is a good thing, obviously. But so how do they then expand their market and make sure all of the oil and gas that they have is being used? So they're talking about flooding Africa with electric vehicles, not electric vehicles, flooding Africa with fossil fuel vehicles, cheap fossil fuel cars that people can use, and bring
gas stoves instead of wood burning stoves.
Yeah, I mean, supersonic jets. They want to develop a fast-track supersonic air travel because it consumes 3 times more jet fuel than normal aircraft. And again, the Centre for Climate Reporting has done great work in uncovering all of this. But you just look at that and you go, I mean, and Saudi Arabia anyway is, their leader has been, he's a murderer and evil, so, and the fact that they're willing to do this around the world is just so, so cynical. While they will also show up at COP.
That's what I was just going to ask. So they will be turning.
Oh yeah, they'll be there, and they'll agree to certain things, and then they'll take certain things out of agreements. They won't agree to phasing out fossil fuels, for example.
Yeah.
What fascinates me about all of this is that, like, you take the big tobacco example, and you can understand someone, trying to get millions of people in poorer countries addicted to cigarettes, because that's kind of far away from them in a sense.
Yeah.
And, they might live a very healthy lifestyle, and their kids might live a very healthy lifestyle, and they might be happy that the town that they grow up in has no smoking laws everywhere and but they're selling them over there. What fascinates me about this is that all of those people who are promoting fossil fuel use and putting their foot in the accelerator as we drive towards the cliff, they're all subject to the negative consequences of climate change too. And the oil companies have known about this. Their science has been just as good as everyone else's science for decades. So it's not that
they're hurting
they don't,
themselves. They're hurting everybody. Yeah.
Right. So they're limiting the viability of the system on which they rely on to produce the wealth that they're producing. So they must know that there's a time-limited game at play, and that at some point the system's going to crash. They can't not know that.
Yeah.
Or there's some level of denial that's being kind of operationalized within their immediate social structure that makes it very easy to unknow it. Like we're talking about earlier, you can not know things. That's possible. Humans are very good at doing that.
Yeah.
At not knowing parts of reality. In fact, we kind of rely on not knowing parts of reality just to function. And we can be a bit selective about what we know and what we don't know. Anyone who was addicted to cigarettes will know this. For example, I was addicted to cigarettes at one point. So I know that I'm smoking cigarettes, and I know that it's terrible for me, but I'm not thinking that right now.
You can't stop.
Right. And all of us who are aware of climate change and also contributing to the problem of climate change, every time you might get in a car or, use a particular food product or whatever it is, we know and we put it out of our minds. So we kind of know at some simple level that we're able to do that. But what fascinates me about this sense of exceptionalism, maybe, is that people are so wealthy and powerful that it's almost like it might amplify that sense of not knowing and sense of protectedness.
People feel
for sure.
protected. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about with this was if I was the leader of Saudi Arabia, which obviously wouldn't happen because I'm a woman, but if I was,
That's the
I'd be
only
looking at-
reason.
yeah, that's the only reason. Also, I'm not Saudi.
She's a fucking woman.
But if I was, I would be looking at a country that is insanely rich because of oil. And I guess what they're thinking is, and I suppose this also applies to governments in other countries, you're thinking about how do we keep our country rich so that I can stay in power? And how do we deal with threats to that? And I think that's probably the thought process around, that means we need to keep selling oil. We've got loads of it. We can't leave it in the ground. I mean, I suppose if you take that example and you say, okay, well, what does that mean in other countries? It means, we have to import LNG, or we have to keep building roads because people want roads and we want to stay in power. So it's a very complicated thing to think through.
I think the other part of it is, and I've had that in my personal life as well, is once you change that behavior, once you reduce your meat consumption or whatever it is, give up driving or stop flying or whatever, then you kind of have to admit, I've been doing a lot of damage to the planet for the last however many years I've been doing that. So I guess there's that thing as well of just doubling down and because if you totally change tack, then you're admitting we've really dropped the ball here for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, however long it is that we've known how bad what we're doing is and still carried on and not done that. So I think you can get into that cycle of
but I mean with the Saudis though, they're actively trying to undo. I mean, so they are using their money to lobby against government subsidies for electric vehicles around the world. They're actively trying, and they're talking about collaborating with a global car manufacturer to develop a cheap car that can be sold to give an oil, and the language is to give an oil uplift for the kingdom.
Okay.
So I mean,
it's fair.
like it's way beyond admitting I'm addicted to like I'm actually going to get more addicted and use more. What's that you said, Darragh, earlier? A ratchet mechanism. It's almost like they're ratcheting it up.
I think the other really, really important perspective in this story that we haven't talked about yet is from the perspective of the African countries, of the sort of lesser developed countries that they are trying to do this too, because it's, on one hand, it's very easy for them to portray that as, charitable and benefiting the local economies and all that kind of stuff. But it's totally counterproductive. Someone, let me see who said this quote. Someone from the think tank Power Shift Africa said that Africa cannot catch up with the rest of the world by trudging along in the footsteps of the polluting nations. It would mean we miss out on the benefits of modern energy solutions that Africa can take advantage of due to its massive renewable energy potential.
Yeah.
And so the thing is there that countries in Africa have a chance to just skip all that fossil fuel infrastructure and move straight to renewables. And when I was living in Kenya, I remember someone talking to me about this, and the examples that they used was mobile phones. They never had landlines really in most of the African continent, so they never put up all those poles. They never put up all that. They just went straight to mobile. And even the same with banking, almost, a lot of people went straight to mobile banking. When I was in Kenya 7 years ago, they already had like a mobile banking system that people never had bank accounts. They went straight to the banking stuff on their phone. And so countries in Africa have this huge opportunity to skip loads of infrastructure. Like there's potential there for, towns or cities or villages to just be totally off-grid, totally self-sufficient, just have their own system. They don't necessarily need to be, linked to a wider grid to the extent that we are. They have so many more opportunities than we do because they're not tied to this huge infrastructure that we already have, that we're locked into. And that is obviously such a terrifying thing. Such
a threat,
it's such a threat to just not just oil companies,
you can't control that.
Exactly. So there's just such a cynicism and a sort of malevolence about what's being done, because it is just using people, using communities, using countries for their own means, with very little benefit to the people in question.
Yeah, I mean, it's the guy you mentioned said it's repulsive, and he's right. And then a Nigerian civil society organization representative said, this Saudi model is a Greek gift that will further sink Africa into climate catastrophe. And that's the reality. And Africa is already at the forefront of the impact of climate change. So yeah, it's vile.
Will this be discussed at COP?
I
don't know.
I would doubt it. I mean, at previous COPs, people said there was almost 2 COPs. There was what's happening in the inside,
the official,
the official, and that's very, very official. And there will be some side events, but in terms of where that will be talked about, I'd imagine it would be the stuff outside of COP. I'm not sure how much of that there is going to be at this COP compared to previous years.
Yeah. So you're not looking forward to COP28? More summary.
No, like, to be fair, as we were talking at the start, I'm looking forward. If Mia Motley is making a speech, I'm looking forward to hearing that. There will be bits and pieces to come out of it. There might be people who would normally talk to me about climate that might have a question here or there. That those kind of things are good, but it's very much the little the little things. Not expecting too much from it, really.
Yeah.
High hopes, low expectations.
Oh well, and the poor old Pope is too sick to go. They were very excited that the Pope was going to actually go to COP, and he's actually, to be fair to him, has been very, very good on climate issues and on poverty and climate justice. So he was supposed to be making a speech there, so he can't make it now. But never fear, King Charles will be there to make a speech. So that's great. That's one Darragh will be
cynicism in your voice.
That's one Darragh will be looking forward to, I'm sure.
You're the one that brought him up, Anna.
Oh yeah.
Owen, any final cop thoughts on that story before we move on?
Just one thing that I was trying to wrap my head around was this notion of unabated fossil fuel use. I don't know if you've heard this term. It's basically a way of saying that we're going to reduce fossil fuels without doing it. So just keep an eye out for that.
Yeah.
I think what it means, if I pick this up right, is fossil fuels whose emissions don't have a plan to be captured, which, by the way, we can't do in anything like the scale that's required.
Yeah.
In other words, if you have a plan to capture the fossil fuel use, you don't have to abate, you don't have to reduce them. And that plan can be unarticulated. It can be somewhere in the future. So saying, for example, we're going to have 100% reduction phase out of unabated fossil fuel use. And everyone goes, oh, that sounds brilliant. It's not.
No, I know. There's so many such weasel words.
Yeah.
And unabated is definitely one of those. For
Diplobabble.
Sure. Diplobabble. That's a great phrase. Yeah. Indeed.
All right. So then the last story is a warning from some.
Just in case you were getting cheered up by the previous stories.
Is warnings from some experts in the UK about the threat of civil unrest due to food shortages.
Oh God, have we not had enough unrest?
Yeah. Anna,
I
think
need a rest.
I think you were the one that.
Well, there's a few different.
You were the one that started it.
I know. Yeah, there was a few different stories about this. I mean, one was that a report showing that the climate crisis and energy costs that have caused a £600 rise in the UK household food bill. And there's more warnings of more to come in 2024. And so that's the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit has said that global heating is directly contributing to the cost of living crisis. So it's just pressure on people, just the food costs. And the UK already has like more soup kitchens and food poverty. It's kind of shocking when you think about it. So that's that pressure is there. And then related to that, then some group of experts from the University of York warned that those kinds of issues could lead to civil unrest. I mean, so if you think about it, the most basic thing is having food available, and the things that and they said that there could be a shortage of what they call popular carbohydrates, such as wheat, bread, pasta, etc. And if that's not available, it's likely to trigger civil unrest. And they talked about the frailties within the UK's food system in that context. So 40% of food experts surveyed believe that civil unrest in the UK in the next 10 years was either possible or more likely than not.
Yeah, so they said in the next 10 years, they said it would be because of distribution type stuff of, supply chain issues. But when they were asked in the context of 50 years, they said the unrest would be more likely because of actually not having enough food to feed the population. The story that came to mind when you were doing that was a few months ago. I don't know if we covered this in the podcast or not, but when there was a story about fruit and vegetable production in Ireland and the harvest being down because of the really
potatoes
the really hot
yeah.
summer and the really wet autumn. And it was on a radio show. I can't remember I can't remember what station it was, and they were interviewing an expert, and he was saying like, we're like harvest is way down in Ireland, and we can't get the food from countries overseas that we usually would because Spain is going through a terrible drought, and there's a we're running out of viable places to produce fruit and vegetables. And that story finished, and then the host went, and now for a story that really scares me. AI. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, you have just spent the last 20 minutes talking about how
food.
loads of places around the world are no longer able to grow or produce food. And AI is the thing that scares you. And yeah.
The robots don't need to eat, Darragh, so
Yeah,
that's a good
just
thing.
the disconnect of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's it. What you just said there, Dara, the disconnect, because there's something unreal about that information when it comes at people. It doesn't feel like it's actually occurring, and we're not being helped to make it feel like it's actually occurring properly through media and politics, because there's an apparent. This is just a news story that'll come and go. The news cycle will go away. So it's not being given the weight and the attention that it deserves, and we're not preparing for the somewhat inevitable shortages that are seemingly more and more likely. I mean, it's hard to kind of paint that as something that might happen. It's much more on the side of very likely
it
to
is
happen.
happening.
And it is
It's
happening.
already
Yeah.
happening in some places, yeah.
So within, whatever number of decades it is or years. And there's something, because when people hear that, they go, oh, geez, that is important. I do like to eat, and it's nice to be able to get stuff to put in the fridge. But it's very, very, very difficult to go back in the sequence of cause to the fact that I'm driving my car or flying on holidays and joining the dots and knowing that my contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is actually a part of what's causing that potential to occur. I think it's extremely hard for people to put that together in their own heads, and we're not being helped to do it.
Yeah, and
well either.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Owen, that you mentioned about the disconnect and the media and stuff, but the other huge part of the disconnect is just how disconnected we are from our food, and how the global food system does that at the moment. We have so little connection to food or to the kind of systems involved in growing food. So many people don't know about where their food comes from, and that's such a huge part of it as well. I think is just that we go into the supermarket, the shelves are full, we buy the stuff, and that's it. Not being aware of all that complexity that goes into producing food, and just how much food production relies on a stable climate. One thing I think that people have said to me before about that is, if I talk about food shortages and they kind of say, yeah, but if things are bad in one region, sure, it'll be fine somewhere else and we'll get food from there, and the planet's warming fairly slowly, we'll be, sure, that's 50, 60 years down the line. And I'm like, no, it just takes one bad year. We don't need it to get like worse and worse and worse and worse until the planet's uninhabitable. We're making the odds of a freak year where food production is affected globally simultaneously around, say, breadbasket regions. We're making that more and more likely every year, to the point that eventually it will be a case of not if but when.
Yeah, I mean, just a small example. There's a story from northern Greece, Halkidiki, where they make the olives or they grow the olives. And the olive crop there is threatened because it's not getting cold enough in winter. So a farmer was interviewed and he's like, it's 15 degrees here. It should be 10 degrees.
Yeah.
And what's happening is the olive trees, they don't have time to rest in winter, and so the crop has been decimated. And that's just a small example of a region that is, has a big change in their climate happening that's affecting how they can grow things.
The thing you said there, Darragh, people are so disconnected that comes from their food. I think something that people really miss a lot as well is like the supermarket. The food doesn't just end up on your supermarket shelf. Somebody has to grow it, and in order for somebody to actually grow it, that's their business.
Yeah.
And so, if your business is at risk, like it doesn't even have to be that the crop is gone. It could be this is too risky for me to do, and we're seeing that happen in Ireland. We had 400 people growing crops here in Ireland like 30 years ago. Now we have 60. And I work in this industry. I hear people complaining and not complaining, but like expressing real concern.
Worrying.
Like there's more closures coming, and it's not that we're like, oh, if one farm closes, sure, we can get our carrots from another farm. That's not how agriculture works in Ireland. One farmer grows one crop because of the way we've industrialized everything here in Ireland. And that's the same for around the world, like different versions of the same problem. But like the people who are growing the food, it's becoming too risky for them.
Yeah.
So even if the climate doesn't eradicate the crop itself, it's going to eradicate the producers because they can't earn an income from it. It doesn't make financial sense. So we just have, it's such a complex problem, but it's really important that people do have that connection to the food that's on their supermarket shelves so that they're aware of that, and then maybe they make more informed kind of decisions around their food consumerism.
Little plug for the special episode we did in the summer with Kenneth Keevy from Green Earth Organics. It's a great
Yeah.
chat about
Yes.
about all this. All right. Shall we move on then to the stories that we didn't get a chance to discuss this week? And I see there's a not here, not anywhere one there. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, just a reminder that you can protest, and Amazon, for example, was hit by strikes and protests across Europe as they were pushing consumption during so-called Black Friday. And here in Ireland, Extinction Rebellion and Not Here, Not Anywhere joined that protest and did some really nice projections saying, make Amazon pay on the company's headquarters here. So, I mean, it's just an example of people taking action around the world to address some of those issues.
Good work, Not Here, Not Anywhere.
And Extinction Rebellion.
No, it's great to see. It's great to see. All right, then there was that story in doing the rounds about how warming of 2 degrees Celsius could trigger catastrophic loss of the world's ice.
You say that like it's such a casual.
Yeah, but
this is one of those stories
Exactly.
that's too
Yeah,
big
yeah.
to even think about. It's too big.
Yeah, no, that's
It's too
exactly-
big to contemplate. I know Owen and I were chatting about this. We were like, it's time to move inland and uphill. It's that one struck you, Owen, didn't it?
Oh, wow. So 2 degrees means the loss of almost all of the world's ice, which means 12 to 20 meters of sea level rise. And that's coming from a pretty reputable, source of scientists. And where our policy trajectory currently is taking us, if everyone does everything they've promised to do, is around 2.1 or something, but probably more like 2.7 or 2.9. That's if everyone does what they've said they're going to do, and nobody's doing what they've said they're going to do. So it's almost like this is starting to seem like an inevitability that we are going to have catastrophic loss of sea ice. And I don't know how to read that. I'm not an ocean, a scientist who so you rely on these reports to kind of, and I haven't heard anyone critically evaluate the information yet. So I don't quite know how to land with it myself. But just on face value, this is one of those things where you need your psychological defenses in play to even know that the information is there, because it could really push you into a pretty dark place. And I live in Howth, right? So, which I'm very lucky to do, and it's a lovely
Which would be
spot.
an island.
Which would be an island, and I'm not quite sure if my house is high up enough to escape the rising sea levels. So I might be and that's not good. It's kind of, we say these things and go, it'd be an island, and then, do I have to buy a boat? How do I get my kids to school? Because they live on the other side of, their school would actually be underwater. So would their grandparents' house and their auntie's house.
Hope you've got room for all those climate refugees, Owen.
Right, and you kind of think locally, but then actually, if you broaden out your scope to the rest of the world, what would be happening? That most of Dublin would be underwater, London would be underwater, Miami would be underwater, massive parts of
New York,
Southeast Asia would be underwater, New York would be underwater, and it's just an extraordinarily difficult thing to even look at and sit with for a moment. That's a potential
Yeah.
that's occurring.
God, I haven't read that story, so I might have read
Yeah,
it
I
before.
suppose. I suppose.
Sorry, Ciara.
Like the. For me, it's all down to the time scale now. You know, with that, it's because of the way the climate system works. The planet's going to keep warming. You know, through feedbacks for it to stabilize, and part of that is kind of the sea ice melting. So really, all we can do, it feels, is decide how quickly or slowly we let this happen. You know, like that's what I think, that this, like when you said there on about a 2-degree world being pretty much free of ice, that's over. You know, that's over the time span of definitely decades, probably centuries, for for that whole cycle to take place. So really, and I suppose for me, what that is just an unrecognizable world. That is just a different world, and the knock-on effects that then has on the climate. It's just it's just a totally different planet. It's not even something I can conceive. So to be honest, I haven't paid too much attention to this story because I just can't at the moment. But but it is just the only thing I can take from it is that we really, really, really need that urgent action. You know, we really, really, really need to keep warming to as little as possible and slow it down as much as possible, because it's about the time scale with this one. It's does it happen over centuries or does it happen over millennia?
There's something about our coping with this that I think is really important to land with as well, because there is quite a toll when you studiously bear witness to the breakdown of a safe climate and notice what's occurring. There's a sense of urgency and the urge to prevent harm, but also a strong sense that there's inertia and people are not doing enough. The sense of dread that the worst is yet to come, the maddening indifference of people who don't seem to see, the exhausting setbacks and inaction. There's a short road to burnout and numbness and depression and despair. So part of, I think, a healthy coping with some of this really big stuff like that is to bring our minds back down into, it's not that we ignore it and do nothing, it's that we bring our minds for periods of time into our circle of influence, things that we can actually do, and we connect with others. Like this podcast is a great example of it. And that kind of remembering to do that with ourselves sometimes is really important. And if you don't mind, a little segue into a couple of local things that I'd like to plug.
Good, go for
Absolutely.
it.
And it's just to kind of bring the mind of people doing things, and at a very local, small level, which actually I think is very important, because it's out of that the groundswell will ultimately emerge if we're hopeful. So one is within the HSE, my local HSE area. And people don't often have a lot of good to say about the HSE, and that's understandable. They're suffering because of its inadequacies. But the climate crew in North Dublin Adult Mental Health HSE is phenomenal. They've done brilliant work. They're way ahead of their targets, the government's targets of 50+% reductions in carbon emissions, because they started a few years back, because there's people in there who just really wanted to do something about this. So huge shout out to Tracy and Kevin and Aidan and all the Estelle and all the other, I'm so sorry if I've missed your names, other people who've been plugging away at this in there for years. They've done phenomenal work. And they're, I think, one of the best HSE sites in the country. So that's just a small snippet of good news. The other thing that I want to plug is on January 20th, myself and Joan Hopkins, who's a local councillor in Baldoyle in Fingal, are running a climate cafe in the Baldoyle Community Centre. So come along. We'd love to see you there. 4:30 to 6:30, cup of tea, some cake and climate chat. And then the third thing is the Psychological Society of Ireland are running a free lecture series And on December 5th, yours truly will be doing an online talk on the psychology of climate change. If you haven't heard enough of it today, there's more coming. So one of the reasons I like doing these things is not because I think that that's going to fundamentally change the likely outcome of ice sheet loss over the next decades and millennia. It's because life is still worth living and there's hope to be got in the company of good people who are doing good things. Yeah. And the spirit of community is what will get us through whatever is occurring. Regardless of how bad things get, we're going to need that spirit of community, and the social capital of that, if you want, is so important, which is why we need to drop into it periodically, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And I think all of those small local actions have a ripple effect as well. And you just don't know where that ripple effect will lead. So I think it's really positive.
You're so relaxing to listen to. I want to bring you to my home and bring you everywhere. And every time I'm stressed out, be like, oh, that was just really lovely what you said. I loved it.
But Ciara, we're recording this so you can replay it.
I genuinely don't remember a time where I've looked at the Zoom screen and seen all four of us so engaged. As to what you were saying, on a personal level, I really, really needed to hear that. I really, really did. So thanks for that. That's I didn't even know how much I needed to hear that. So thanks for that.
Yeah, it's better than a positive climate story. So I think we should move on to our actions, because my positive climate story is kind of
okay. So Eoin gave us some good recommended actions there, and we'll try to get the details of those into the show notes. And if you feel inspired, next Saturday, the 9th of December, there is a COP28 Global Day of Action. So there's a march from the Docklands Bord Gáis Energy Theatre to the GPO, and that's organised by the Climate Justice Coalition. So it looks like being a big day of action, and the theme is #NowWeRise. So, and they're not talking about sea levels; they're talking about people power. So get to that if you can.
Fantastic. I have one that I don't know if people saw recently, that the EU voted to renew the license for glyphosate, which is basically just a chemical that's killing the planet. So that's bad news. But in good news, there's a Donegal man who is taking on the authorities, and he has set up a petition to ask Donegal Council to cease the use of glyphosates, even though the EU has said it's all right to use. So I think that's really inspiring. So we've a link there to sign the petition. If anyone, I signed it and I'm not in Donegal. Who cares? They're not going to check. But I think it's a good idea, and everyone should set up their own petitions. And we're going to just stop Ireland. We don't need, as some of our right-wing friends would say, we don't need the EU telling us what to do. And in this instance, they're correct. So let's set up our own petitions. We have some common ground.
Very good, Ciara.
Ciara planning a Dexit, an exit in Donegal from the EU. Great. I think that is a good place to leave it. Eoin, thanks so much for joining us. It's been so great to have you along this week.
Yeah, good to chat. Always nice to check in with you guys.
Yes,
thanks,
thank you,
Eoin. It's been fantastic as always.
And Ciara and Anna, great to chat to you as well today.
Right back at you.
That's it. We will be back in 2 weeks' time for the last episode of the season to round up COP. We'll chat to you all in 2 weeks. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.